Number 10. D23. Brie was announced as the newest member of the Marvel Universe in 2019, starring in the film Captain Marvel as the titular superhero. Now, at first people were pretty excited to see what Marvel would do with the property. Captain Marvel is, after all, one of the original cosmic superheroes from comic book canon. Leave me alone, I know I'm a nerd. However, when the movie was actually released, fans were upset with Brie's performance. According to them, she was stale and seemed bored from start to finish. When she was asked about the online hate at D23's red carpet in 2022, Brie said that she wasn't sure if she'll even continue to play the character beyond her upcoming Marvel sequel, The Marvels. She's not sure if people even still want her to do it. She's aware of all the hate surrounding her character, and she defends that role by telling people that that's how she's told to play the role. But it's also Brie Larson. She's always been a little bit stiff, and that's why things are funny that she's in. Watch Scott Pilgrim, people! Number 9. Wired. Wired is a media outlet that invites celebrities to participate in autocomplete interviews, where they will type a phrase or the celebrity's name and let them answer the questions that come up in the Google search engine. It's actually a pretty neat interview format that has resulted in some pretty fun moments over the years. 4 years ago, while promoting Captain Marvel, Brie stopped by the studio to deliver her honest answers to some of the internet's most searched questions. The interview ended up being Brie quickly dismissing many of the questions, asking why they were even being asked in the first place. The questions ranged from would Brie Larson work out to where is Brie Larson from to Brie Larson, dog? The autocomplete portion isn't always great with proper English. At one point she was asked why she never went to college, answering with, because I'm bad at it. At college in general or what? Like, I'm not sure. Many people commented on the interview asking her what college offered a course called college. Roasts. The roasts continued left and right as the interview began to gain more and more traction, bringing in millions of views. Of the interviews on this list, this is going to be one of the more tame ones for sure, but with over 10 million views, there are moments from this interaction that we will never forget. Number 8. The Cannes Film Festival. The Cannes Film Festival has been taking place in France for over 74 years, being the premier destination of hundreds of international and independent films, as well as some projects that will eventually make their way to the big screen around the world. A few months ago, while answering questions at a panel for the festival, Brie was asked how she felt about Johnny Depp's film opening the festival, considering how heavily she was involved in the Me Too movement. She was immediately confused as to what that question means or what it had to do with anything that she had just been talking about. The person clarified by asking if she would be watching the movie and how she felt about it opening the festival. Her response was that she wasn't sure if she would see the movie or how she would feel if she did, before moving on to the next question. We're not sure what prompted someone to think that this would be an appropriate or relevant question to ask her, but if that dude was a journalist, something tells me that they are fired. Number 7. Ellen DeGeneres. The Ellen DeGeneres Show was not just a toxic work environment, it was also an awkward talking environment. While promoting Avengers Endgame in 2019, Brie and Scarlett Johansson appeared on the daytime talk show together to share some behind-the-scenes stories and dish with Ellen about their pasts. The first question Ellen asks is, how did you two meet? To which Brie responds, dinner on New Year's Eve. Well, that's not exactly what happened. Scarlett was jokingly furious and asked Brie if she really didn't know how they met. She then had to remind Brie that they worked on a movie together called Don John with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Brie is so embarrassed and almost threw herself right off the couch. The reason it wasn't the first thing that she thought of was because Brie acted as a glorified extra on set, according to herself, with ScarJo. The moment is played off as playful in the interview, and the interview ends up getting back on track, but that is one of the most uncomfortable ways to start an interview ever. Number 6. Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy has a bad habit of bringing people on his show and forcing them to play games. Case in point, Brie Larson on Jimmy Fallon. While promoting Endgame, she stopped by NBC to chat with Jimmy about the MCU, her position in the film, and her ability to use a lightsaber. According to Brie, she's a massive Star Wars nerd, so meeting Sam Jackson was a dream come true. To celebrate Star Wars Day and give Brie a taste of power, Jimmy invited Brie to play around a Beat Saber, a virtual reality game where you dodge walls and slice blocks to the beat of a song. Jimmy did not do very well. In fact, his song ended before it finished because he missed so many blocks. When Brie took her turn, it wasn't very different. For a woman who played a Marvel superhero, her hand-eye coordination is not great. Brie misses several blocks, and while she did make it to the end of her song, the audience was expecting more from Captain Frickin' Marvel. Number 5. Ellen again. The Ellen Show, one of Brie's favorite places to share her tales and promote new films. That place doesn't exist anymore, sucks to suck. While stopping by the Ellen Show in 2019, Brie was excited to be attending her first ever Super Bowl. Ellen is great at getting the awkward stuff out of the way as quickly as possible, because the first thing that she asked this time is how much knowledge Brie had on the sport of football. Despite being from Los Angeles, Brie has no idea who the Rams were or why they were the home team, because she's literally never seen a Ram once while she was out and about in LA. She then fumbles through an explanation before Ellen changes the topic entirely. Eventually, Ellen asks Brie how she feels about cats before a man dressed as a giant cat popped out of a box behind her. Brie sits for a moment and contemplates her feelings before saying to Ellen in a very stern voice that she hates cats. Before Ellen goes to commercial break. This is one of the most uncomfortable interviews Brie ever had to do on that show. While many guests have been scarred by the frightening feline before, Brie did not think it was funny one little bit. Number 4. Between Two Ferns. Between Two Ferns is considered to be one of the most entertaining, satirical talk shows ever created. Hangover star Zach Galifianakis began hosting the series in 2008 after a short test segment was filmed for a sketch pilot called The Right Now Show. After the show failed to land at any network, the creative team behind the series, Scott Ackerman and BJ Porter, released the skits on the YouTube channel Funny or Die, where they quickly became a viral sensation. The premise of the show is for Zach to create the most awkward and uncomfortable interviews of all time. Before the celebrity guest appears on the show, though, they're usually warned that it will most certainly go south and are asked to over-exaggerate their emotions. Considering most people on the show are actors, there have been some truly outlandish moments over the years, but when Brie Larson made her appearance on the show, the proof is in the editing. The 5-minute clip is essentially just Zach asking ridiculous questions while Brie is supposed to answer and egg him on. The entire thing feels pretty one-sided, until Zach asks Brie again if her real first name is Gorgonzola, as she gets confused with Alison Brie a lot. Get it? Cheese? This interview is definitely for entertainment purposes, but it is one of the few moments on that show that many people chose to skip. Number 3. Jimmy Kimmel. Brie doesn't just play Captain Marvel on the silver screen, she also played the character while filming segments for a roller coaster in Disney Paris. Whoa! Brie stopped by Jimmy Kimmel Live after hosting the show only 2 years prior, during a brief moment in time when Jimmy was unable to host. One of the first things the two talk about is Brie's dream that had finally come true. It turns out when you're a famous movie star, you're kind of allowed to call the shots. So is it really a surprise that Brie Larson used her power to talk the big wigs at Marvel Studios into opening a theme park ride starring herself and Iron Man? She doesn't mention that Iron Man is involved with the ride on the show. That's something that people had to find out when they went to the attraction. The ride at Disneyland Paris allows fans to walk through a replica spaceship and watch as Captain Marvel interacts with Iron Man on the walls. The ride seems neat, but the awkwardness comes from the fact that the entire time she's talking about it with Jimmy, she continues to call it her ride. She is the star. A ride just based around Captain Marvel would have been fun, but the fact that it's a Brie Larson and Iron Man ride, lame. Number 2. BBC One. BBC Radio 1 is known for delivering some pretty solid interviews from the past few years. The celebrities who stop into the studio tend to have a great time and leave with smiles. Most of Brie's interview is just that. There is some nice back and forth between Brie and the interviewer, Allie Plum, and things are very light, right up towards the end of the conversation, where Allie asks Brie if she has yet to make it onto the Avengers WhatsApp group. She's shocked and seems not to know what the heck he's talking about. He was, of course, referring to the original group chat between the main cast of the original Avengers film that many people are not a part of. The OG cast even have matching tattoos to commemorate their shoot. Not only was Brie very taken back, but she also seemed a bit confused and tried to figure out what she did to be neglected from the crew. Learning you aren't in a group chat is one thing, but learning that during an interview, not so fun. And at number 1, E.T. Avengers Endgame brought together almost every single character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe up until that point, including Brie Larson, who hadn't even filmed her solo flick yet when she first walked on set. While doing the press tour for Endgame, Brie regularly did interviews with her co-stars Don Cheadle and Chris Hemsworth, who play War Machine and Thor respectively. While sitting down with Entertainment Tonight, the question of competition was brought up, and Brie claimed that there was no boys versus girls type deal because everyone agreed worried that she is now the strongest Avenger. There is a lot of sarcasm and teasing being tossed around between these three, but Chris's reaction to the question is so serious, he gets just a little heated before telling Brie that she's actually not the strongest Avenger. Dawn and Chris also joke about having to put Brie through initiation, making it feel like two big brothers just mocking their little sister on national television. Not comfortable at all.
At number 10, Jonah Hill. Jonah was a comedy giant before making his move to the more dramatic side of acting, returning to those comedy roots in 2012 when he starred alongside Channing Tatum in a film reboot of the TV series 21 Jump Street. Joining them in the cast was Dave Franco, Nick Offerman, Ice Cube, and of course Brie Larson as Hill and Franco's love interest. The movie itself is hilarious, with Hill and Tatum delivering performances that have yet to be matched. Larson, however, is actually one of the duller characters of the flick. Her character is a part of a high school crew of climate activists and substance dealers. Despite being surrounded by comedic talent in basically every scene, Larson was stiff throughout the majority of the flick. Jonah Hill has commented in the past that he found it difficult to play off of Brie while filming scenes together. Instead of being excited about the project when speaking on the red carpet, Jonah seemed more interested in just getting to a seat. Since then, Hill and Larson have never appeared in another project together. In fact, despite the first film ending with the two becoming a couple, Brie's character was written out of the sequel and replaced. At number 9, Aubrey Plaza. Aubrey and Brie worked together on a movie from 2010 called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, based on the manga of the same name. Larson and Plaza were only on screen together for a handful of scenes, as Brie's character doesn't really come into play until Scott reaches Ramona's third evil ex-boyfriend, with Brie acting as Scott's ex, Envy Adams. The reason these two actresses weren't featured in a ton of scenes together was actually because their chemistry together was insane. These two would regularly break in the middle of a take and tended to spend a lot of time together off screen. Aubrey and Brie have been rising in the ranks of Hollywood following Scott Pilgrim. Plaza was cast in the mockumentary series Parks and Recreation, while Larson was being offered roles in more serious flicks. They have never worked together again in person, but their voices will be featured side by side in the Netflix animated series reboot of Scott Pilgrim, where they will be reprising their same roles. At number 8, Jacob Tremblay. Ever since Jacob Tremblay first appeared in the film Room alongside Brie Larson, he has been one of the busiest kids in Hollywood. The young actor has starred in several projects, from Disney movies like Luca to horror flicks like Before I Wake. Starring alongside Larson, however, was his first real acting gig, working very close with the actress for months on end. The film stars Brie and Jacob as mother and son held captive in a room for 5 years, with Jacob's character not knowing what the outside world looks like. The film is heart-wrenching and deserved every single award it received, but unfortunately for young Jacob, his time on set left him with a strange feeling towards his on-screen mother. Jacob has nothing but lovely things to say about his time on set and with Brie, but over the months of filming, they became extremely close, to the point where he called Brie mom a few times during interviews for the project. He has never exclusively said that he will never work with Larson again, but if you accidentally called someone mom more than once, would you want to work with them again? At number 7, Scarlett Johansson. The Ellen DeGeneres show was not just a toxic work environment, it was also an awkward talking environment. While promoting the Avengers Endgame in 2019, Brie and Scarlett appeared on the daytime talk show together to share some behind-the-scenes stories and dish with DeGeneres about their past. The first question Ellen asked is, "How did you two meet?" To which Larson responds with, "Dinner on New Year's Eve." Well, nope, that wasn't it. Johansson was jokingly furious and asked Larson if she really didn't know. She then had to remind Brie that they had previously worked together on the film Don John with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Larson was so embarrassed and almost threw herself right off the couch. The reason it wasn't the first thing she thought of was because Larson acted as a glorified extra on set, according to herself, while Johansson was the Scarlett Johansson. The moment is played off as playful, and the interview ends up getting back on track, but that has to be one of the most uncomfortable ways to start an interview ever. At number 6, Chris Hemsworth. Brie and Chris have only starred in one movie side by side in one scene, but despite that, they were still made to do a press tour together to promote the final Avengers film, Endgame, in 2019. While making an appearance on Entertainment Tonight, the actors were asked if there was ever some kind of behind-the-scenes competition between the men and the women of the cast. Larson said there was no boys versus girls mentality because she is the strongest Avenger, to which Hemsworth disagreed. Chris made the argument that he is the strongest while questioning Larson's confidence in the matter. This interview wasn't the first time these two had a spat on tour either. Several interviews between the two were fueled with sarcasm and snappy remarks, which caused many to speculate that there may have been some tension behind the scenes. Chris basically confirms this every time she's brought up in interviews. While it sometimes feels like he sees her as a little sister in his life, other times she appears to be that annoying friend that you just can't stand for what feels like no reason. While both will be a part of the MCU for a long time to come, the chances of them ever getting written into a script together is highly unlikely. At number 5, Amy Schumer. The film Trainwreck is one of those comedy movies that's not exclusively funny or dramatic, it's somewhere else. It's an okay movie featuring decent performances from everyone involved, including LeBron James, who almost steals the show from Schumer several times. Larson plays Schumer's sister Kim, and in the film, they were raised by a father who told them that monogamy isn't real after their mother leaves him. Larson and Schumer spent a lot of time together on set, as they again played sisters on screen. Schumer had a small tinge of frustration held back at all times. While she was certainly famous in her own right, having multiple comedy specials and a TV show, Brie was a rising star, being cast in Oscar-nominated movies. Brie did steal every scene she's in with Amy, but that's not saying much considering everyone almost steals the show a few times. Since the release of the film, their careers have gone in very different directions. Amy still stars in comedy films to this day, but she's also taken her talent to the dramatic side of acting, and while most films do well with critics, fan reviews have been abysmal. Where Brie Larson has starred in several projects like The Room, for which she won an Oscar for Best Actress in a leading role, as well as becoming a literal superhero with Captain Marvel. Amy seems to be a little annoyed at that fact, as she has yet to cast Brie in any of her projects and vice versa. At number 4, Michael Cera. Michael portrayed the title character Scott in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World in 2010, while Brie Larson played his evil ex, Envy Adams. Cera and Larson only spent a few days working on set together, but it was enough time for a young Michael to develop a little crush on Brie. She may have been cast to play his evil ex on screen, but behind the scenes they got along swimmingly. While Mary Elizabeth Winstead was cast to play his main love interest, their off-screen chemistry was just not as strong as it was with Larson. Unfortunately for Cera, the feelings of romance were not reciprocated, and he had actually been existing in the friend zone, a zone that Michael ended up being happy to live in. Following the shoot, the two kept in close contact and reportedly became very close friends, with Cera eventually meeting his current wife Nadine and Brie dating a man named Alex Greenwald until 2019. Despite smoothing things over and becoming close friends, Cera has yet to work with Larson on any projects apart from the upcoming Scott Pilgrim Netflix series. At number 3, Tom Hiddleston. You may have forgotten that Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston starred in a movie together because the movie they were in was not so good. Tom and Brie starred in Kong Skull Island, which was visually striking, but in terms of its human cast, there was something left to be desired. Hiddleston acted as the main human character of the piece, with the film centering around the actor and his crew of scientists, explorers, and soldiers traveling to the mysterious and uncharted Skull Island, where they meet monsters galore, including one of the original massive movie monsters, King Kong. Now, the reason the film didn't turn out so well was apparently due to the behind-the-scenes drama. This was a movie that saw the studio get heavily involved. Tends to happen when someone's trying to develop a franchise, never usually works out. As the shoot went by, things were changed constantly, from lines to CGI to full scenes being rewritten to better suit the studio. The entire cast was frustrated at the situation, creating a very gloomy and sour vibe on set. Hiddleston currently stars as Loki in the MCU, where Larson also exists as Captain Marvel. According to Disney insiders, Tom has made comments about the chances of their characters meeting together on screen, with him apparently saying if it's anything like Kong, it will be a nightmare. While not an outright refusal, it seems that Tom will do everything in his power to stop that from happening. At number 2, Mark Wahlberg. The actor is no stranger to difficult shoots. The man behind films like Father Stu and Patriots Day has been in so many movies over the years that he's drafted his very own list of celebrities he refuses to work with. Somewhere in his top 5 is Brie Larson, who worked on the 2014 film The Gambler alongside Wahlberg and John Goodman, acting as the love interest to Mark's character. Having to spend so much time together on set caused the two to become very close, but not friendly. At first, things seemed to be fine, but as the production went on, Wahlberg reportedly became annoyed with Larson's performance. She's certainly not the worst thing about this movie, but according to Mark behind the scenes, she was fumbling mumbling lines a lot, which caused him to lose his focus, something the actor does not like to do. Ever since the release of the film, Wahlberg prefers not to talk about his co-star and opts instead to only talk about John Goodman. And at number 1, Zach Galifianakis. Larson and Galifianakis have only sat together in the same room one time during an episode of his series Between Two Ferns in 2019. The parody talk show is literally designed to produce some of the most uncomfortable interviews of all time, with the celebrity usually being in on the joke. Larson's appearance on Between Two Ferns was another fun addition to the series, with the actress doing everything she could to keep a straight face. While the interview seemed a bit uncomfortable for comedy's sake, according to Galifianakis, that also translated behind the scenes. Larson admitted to having a fun time on the set, but she's also admitted to being an introvert in the past. According to Zach, in between A and B, she would not speak to anyone other than her team. Galifianakis' greatest strength is, of course, the comedy genre, so it was especially frustrating for him not to be getting a super exciting performance from her both during and after the interview. Larson is a good sport and tends to do interviews that make her a little uncomfortable in order to cross it off her list, like playing VR games with Jimmy Fallon or doing Hot Ones in 2021. While Zach has never come out on camera and said, "I refuse to work with Brie Larson," these two haven't collaborated together on any other projects. When asked about the interview, both are quick to say it was a little weird but also a little fun.
First up, Chris Hemsworth and Don Cheadle. Chris Hemsworth and Don Cheadle did an interview with Larson in 2019 to promote their latest film, Avengers Endgame. But it was clear during the interview that Hemsworth and Cheadle do not like Brie Larson, and anytime she spoke, they made their disdain very clear. While speaking to Entertainment Tonight, the trio got on the topic of stunt doubles, and Hemsworth stated he does a lot of his own stunts, but not the more dangerous things. Larson then chimed in that she does all of her own stunts because she believed that's what everyone else did. Hemsworth even mockingly praised her as the next Tom Cruise, as Tom Cruise famously does all of his own stunts. Many felt it was rude that she butted in to make those comments while Hemsworth was praising the work of his stunt doubles. And worst of all, the quartering later exposed that Larson did use a stunt double and she wasn't even telling the truth. Then the topic of which of their superhero characters was the strongest came up, and Larson replied, quote, "There's no competition for me because I'm the strongest." In response, Hemsworth said, quote, "Meh, we'll let her think that." Then there was an incident with Cheadle. While Larson was talking about something involving the three of them, Larson started hitting both men with her elbows in a playful way, kind of like this thing. But it was obvious that Cheadle was not having any of it, and even flat out told her to stop, not in a playful way. Body language experts broke down the interaction, and it was clear that he was not pleased. One expert named Mandy O'Brien made a video breaking down the entire interview, criticizing Larson's appearance and behavior during the Marvel movies press tour. During the interview with Cheadle and Hemsworth, O'Brien said that the men were relaxed, while Larson's body language was domineering and stiff. O'Brien felt that Larson was trying to be taller than the men, essentially trying to dominate them, which obviously is not a behavior that will develop a friendship between coworkers. O'Brien added, quote, "I guess in her mind, domination equals acceptance. In reality, submission will get you a lot further in friendship circles than trying to dominate and boss everyone around." Next up, Jeremy Renner. Clearly, Brie Larson is not very good in interviews, and she had another awkward interaction with her co-star, Jeremy Renner, during an interview. The topic of discussion was being a celebrity and being conscious of their platforms. Larson responded, quote, "I'm committed to self-improvement. I work at being the best person that I can be and using this platform for as much good as I can. That doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but I'm very comfortable with that, allowing myself to learn from those mistakes." During the conversation, Renner looks completely annoyed, like he's holding back an eye roll. When it's his turn to speak, Renner says, quote, "I'm pretty accountable and responsible in my own life at any rate. Celebrity is not something I use any sort of platform to be more responsible or accountable, I suppose." Basically firing back at Larson's idea that being a celebrity means she needs to be a voice for social issues. Next up, fan boycott. Following all the backlash against Larson and the clear dislike of her by her co-stars, it was not a shock to see that petitions popped up trying to axe Larson from the next Captain Marvel film. Unfortunately for fans, the movie did get a sequel starring Larson, but it was clear that Marvel made some changes to please their fans and made the sequel named The Marvels instead, meaning instead of solely focusing on Larson's character, the movie would also showcase other Marvel superheroes. And it's very clearly a demotion from her last role. Based on the performance of this upcoming film, her time with MCU could end for good. And this is not the only project that Larson has been demoted in. The Marvel animated series named What If also demoted and replaced Larson in the show. The show features Marvel's biggest stars like Michael B. Jordan, Sebastian Stan, and Tom Hiddleston. However, Larson was shockingly replaced in the series by up-and-coming actress Alexandra Daniels. Daniels opened up to her fans during a Twitch stream about getting that part in Marvel's animated series, saying, quote, "When I auditioned, they were looking for a Brie Larson voice double, so they sent a clip of Brie Larson from the movie and I was like, cool, I can do that. that. And I did it, and like a month later, they were like, you booked it, and that was my first voice job ever. She continued that she thought she would not get any credit because she was just going to be a voice double. But then she was surprisingly given credit in the first episode, and it was clear that she was going to be a real character. More bad news for Brie Larson. And finally, Brie Larson herself. Back in 2018, Brie Larson got in a huge scandal when she was accused of being a quote white man hater after a slew of questionable interviews. After she was cast as Captain Marvel, the predominantly male fanbase was not happy. According to Screen Rant, a small group of extremely vocal fans pushed back at the female-centric film. Then Larson made some comments about diversity and gender that made matters much worse. In 2018, while accepting an award at the Crystal and Lucy Awards, Larson decided to comment on the fact that so many movie critics are white men. She said, quote, "I don't need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him." She went on to speak about the movie A Wrinkle in Time, saying that it was not made for white men, and she wants to hear what women of color think about the movie. She repeated that she, quote, "does not hate white dudes" throughout her speech, rather she just wants diversity. Even though she got some heat for those comments, she doubled down on them a year later in an interview with Marie Claire UK. She said about the topic of movie reviews, quote, "I started paying attention to what my press days looked like, the critics reviewing movies, and noticed it appeared to be overwhelmingly white males." These comments sparked backlash from men's rights groups who tried to start a boycott against Captain Marvel. In 2019, Cinema Blend reported that Larson clarified her comments by saying, quote, "What I'm looking for is to bring more seats to the table," although many felt she took a stance of exclusion rather than inclusion. Brie Larson also got the attention of all her haters when she launched her own YouTube channel. Her first video was called "So I Made a Decision," announcing the channel. It got great views, over 500,000 in less than a day, and over 127,000 subscribers. But the dislikes on the video were very high. In that time, the video raked up over 50,000 likes, but 18,000 dislikes, with some of the comments saying that the dislikes should be way higher. One comment read that when they first saw the video, it had 18,000 dislikes, but when they came back to it about an hour later, it only had 17,000 dislikes, so 1,000 less, meaning that she was potentially covering it up and getting rid of them somehow. This was even more proof for her haters that she was just a liar. Another scandal that got Larson in some serious heat was when she lied about her casting in Captain Marvel. Fans respect that she has to keep it a secret for the sake of contracts, but the way she went about it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. According to Cheat Sheet, a month before Marvel confirmed that Larson had been cast as Carol Danvers and the 2016 Comic-Con, a reporter asked her about the upcoming movie, trying to get the inside scoop on the role. To the question of if she was playing the role, Larson responded, quote, "Who's Captain Marvel?" She continued to play dumb, saying, quote, "So I would be playing a man? I'm down to play Chris Evans." Oh wait, no, Chris Evans is Captain America. Who's Captain Marvel? I have no idea what I'm talking about. Since they announced only a few days later, it's clear that she knew what was going on. But the annoying way that she went about it really rubbed people the wrong way.
In at number 10, Marvel. Now this 10th point has layers because I'm sure many of you are aware of the levels of hate Brie has received over time. But if not, well, buckle up because you're in for a hella long ride. Point 10A starts with the most recent release of her newest film, The Marvels, which dropped on Marvel Entertainment's YouTube channel on April 11, 2023. This trailer is the company's most disliked ever released, and despite a lot of fan speculation that it's solely Brie's fault, there's another running theory that the inclusion of an all-female superhero cast may be behind some of that flack. The film snippet was released earlier this week, and as of now has received 468,000 dislikes, significantly catching up to its current total likes of 497,000. Though upon its initial reveal, the number of dislikes surpassed the likes by thousands. Now we turn into point 10.B, which touches on how much Marvel fans despised Brie from the start and why. Though it's not truly known for being one specific thing, she has since received a lot of slack for pretty much endless reasons. Whether it's her sudden lack of enthusiasm or something deeper, Brie has pretty much seen it all, but we'll discuss that more later on. Finally, our 10.C point is her Captain Marvel role. Brie was heavily praised for her roles in comedic films. Before landing Captain Marvel, the actress excelled in being humorous. But down the road, things seemed to drastically change. As she sunk further and further into her CM role, the majority of her humor notably disappeared. It got to a point where fans dubbed her unfit for her character, with some arguing that her ego got in the way of her natural talent. She was originally chosen for the role because she could balance simultaneously being sassy and funny. However, the longer she stayed in her Marvel role, the further she seemed to stray from that naturality. All the years of hate resulted in Brie addressing whether or not she planned to continue portraying Captain Marvel. But that leads us right into our 9th point. Before we break down the rest of today's list though, be sure to smash that like button on today's top 10 countdown. In at number 9, arrogant actress. If you were looking for that solid reason why Brie is so hated as an actress, these next 9 points may just confirm everything, but specifically our 9th point. Marvel fans never seem to forgive the claimed fact that Brie has become far too egotistical for her role in the MCU. MCU. And the worst part? Supposedly it's not even her playing Captain Marvel that brought about her supposed arrogance, but rather what the role did to seemingly fill up her head and cause an attitude. Reports state that the instant Brie was phased into a major franchise, she transitioned into this conceited actress who now takes being talented for granted. Because of this, her acting quality has taken a supposed hit and now reflects her off-screen character harshly. It also turns fans off and leaves them with a sour taste in their mouth. For example, most notably, collective groans from MCU fans were heard worldwide when the announcement for Brie's reprisal of Carol Danvers was released. Her recast for the Marvels, as aforementioned, showed Brie as another huge addition to the film after her main character moment in her superhero flick, Captain Marvel. While embarking on various interviews and press tours for the OGCM movie and simultaneously promoting Avengers Endgame, devoted Marvel supporters found just about every way to criticize Brie's every move, dubbing her aggressive, snarky, defensive, and arrogant amid endless other ridicule. Following the 2019 release of Captain Marvel, hardcore MCU fans ripped Brie and her portrayal apart, claiming her character was poorly thought out and her acting measured up to such. Both ahead of and after Avengers Endgame came out, shortly after Brie's films, a handful of MCU actors, including Brie this time, shared a press tour. During these sit-downs, fans assumed Brie's castmates disliked her and her behavior, eventually resulting in compilations of the shadiest moments online. The D23 Expo was the first to see the Captain Marvel sequel, and when Brie was questioned by a Variety journalist on how long she planned to portray her newer Avengers character, in line with the original sequence of retirements, Brie arguably replied in a snarky manner. She shrugged nonchalantly while looking around and exclaiming, "I don't know, does anyone want me to do it again?" Seeming taken aback, the journalist chuckled while glancing at the camera, assuming Brie was just being modest. However, Brie seemed to be addressing the intense hatred she received ever since originally taking on her character. Spreading like wildfire on the internet, fans began sharing a list of names to steal Brie's role, including Zendaya, Blake Lively, Jennifer Lawrence, Emilia Clarke, and Sophie Turner. To this day, the interview's replies are toxified with hate for the actress, as many labeled Brie insufferable. Slated for its November 2023 release, it seems Brie's haters will have to chew the metal in their mouths over her role a bit longer, as she appears to be in it for the long run. In at number 8, no good rumors. Rumors are always gonna do it for just about any star. So of course, when Brie stepped out into the limelight and grew her following, she wasn't excluded from the gossip and speculation surrounding her newer life. Not when she was also soon being hated for simply breathing within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The rumors of Brie's onset behavior, for one, is a running theory that just can't be squashed. And regardless if there's any real truth to the matter or not, they've already marked Brie's character. So much so that reports announced Don Cheadle confirming the speculation surrounding Brie in the past. But instead of feeding into the mess, Don actually revealed that fans were reading far too much into her rumored bad blood with her castmates. In a series of since deleted tweets sourced by Looper, Don formally wrote regarding the fact, "Whoever you are, take a break from your detective work. We're all good. Hope you enjoyed the movie." And to take things one step further, Don even added the actress, finalizing, "So many speculators tonight, ma. See you tomorrow." Clearly, these bouts of rumors continue to play into the hot water Brie's landed in time and time again though. But I, for one, am glad Don put at least those rumors to rest for good. In at number 7, white actress, white influence. A huge portion of Brie's controversies actually stems from her stance on white influence, believe it or not. She takes a stand to push awareness but receives much backlash in return. Because while her intentions seem good, it also appears Brie doesn't fully grasp the understanding of not being a Caucasian actress in the industry. While she is bold to discuss the topic, those conversations don't hold much to her overall success and the roles she continues to land. And of course, this isn't really only her fault, but it still showcases a specific misunderstanding behind the curtains. Once the show unveils, Brie continues to speak what she feels is right, but unfortunately ends up representing her messages wrong. In at number 6, controversies. In even more controversial displays comes the world's triggered disdain for the actress due to how loudly she pushes for change in award categorizations. Now, this may seem backwards, but since Brie has become a previous Academy Award winner for her past work, she's been dubbed hypocritical for speaking against the same accolade show for their decisions, according to netizens. However, Brie has been insistent on how much she disapproves of the way prestigious awards are voted on and critiqued. Brie has even taken a stand by releasing various statements echoing the sentiment. But of course, her calls to action have all been displayed very publicly, leading to the people calling her out for calling out the staff and film critics' diversities, which are in charge of interviewing nominations and making the ultimate decisions. In at number 5, wrong intentions. This next point falls between the topics of Brie using her voice and being well misunderstood in the industry. As an actress who's been labeled as unafraid to use her voice, interviews, her strongly vocalized political and personal views have been commended and strongly hated, in turn leading to hate towards her. The issue with this lies in people deciphering whether or not her views are merely an act or she genuinely stands for them. Additionally, Brie's words and actions tend to be received in an assaulting way while attempting to allegedly take a stand for the greater good. In retrospect, people could just not believe her, or it could be that Brie lacks a good sense of expressiveness that deems her intentions uncertain to those receiving it. It's no wonder everything she says somehow translates into a negative aspect, if so. In at number 4, YouTube made things worse. Brie was already knee-deep in negative attention when she decided to launch her own YouTube channel. The general public was already questioning her every move and talent. And who would have thought creating the channel would have added even more controversy to Brie's list? Certainly not her, I hope. Her content brought in a massive amount of views, but she faced major backlash in the process. Her first video initially received just about as many dislikes as likes, which just isn't the standard for the video sharing platform. Despite fans speaking out in support of Brie, commentators have also expressed their negative opinions. And while as for Brie, she seems to pretend she just simply doesn't see it. In at number 3, scalding statements. There have been questions floating around about whether Brie's deeply shocking comments can be classified as feminism or discrimination. Many of her statements are indeed strong-minded and bold, often calling out or saying things that hold truth to those who are guilty. But this also leads to netizens' opinions of intimidation. However, a handful of Brie's comments have heavily leaned towards the side of discrimination, but not in the racial sense as one may think. This would be feministic discrimination according to reports. A lot of what Brie says has caused her to be labeled a difficult woman who hates white males. And obviously, people's opinions are valid, but this may be a bit overboard. It could also be true though, so I'll let you all be the judge of this point. In number 2, jealousy. Now this next one isn't very fact-based, as according to fans of Brie, the reason she's so hated is a case of plain old classic jealousy. That hint of the ugly green venomous emotion can perhaps be the real reason people despise her, and it wouldn't be very shocking if so. She's an actress who keeps landing huge roles, is unafraid to use her platform, and continues growing in success. Surely this is grounds for some type of envy, right? But is this disdain based on truth, or are people really just envious of her unabashed accomplishments? Well, let's take note of other stars who faced insane amount of hate on their come up, for example, like Meghan Markle, Jake Paul, and Yoko Ono. All these celebrities seem to have their own separate reasons for being rumoredly problematic or reportedly worth being chewed up and spit out in the media. And it seems Brie has unfortunately long since joined that pity party. And in at number 1, maxed out talent. Critics have deemed it mutually impossible to factor out whether or not Brie's talents are now limited or if her reputation perceives her and people just can't stand it. A lot of the questions surrounding her abilities stem from her role as Captain Marvel, as discussed earlier. As this is a huge and widely supported industry, it's no surprise fans were unhappy with at least one actor in the MCU. But can we blame it all on her portrayal? Who knows? Still, Brie never really strived to change anything about her character to possibly win fans over, just ignored their vocalization for change. And of course, no one is ever as angry as a group of supporters who remain unnoticed, hence the hate that followed. Though Brie is talented, the question here is whether she has the right talent for what she's still doing.
In at number 10, Terrence Howard. Back in 2008, when the Marvel Universe kicked off with the first Iron Man film, most of the cast would soon become key players in what would be a very successful franchise. Terrence Howard was the original War Machine and Tony Stark's sidekick slash, well, babysitter. In past interviews when Terrence was first starting out, even he realized that he was difficult to work with. After his first starring role in the film Hustle and Flow, Howard told interviewers that the reason he isn't in the limelight is a direct result of how difficult he can be to work with. Unfortunately for Terrence, Marvel Studios is equally difficult to work with, and in the early days of filming, they just started cleaning house. If anyone gave them the slightest issue, they were replaced at the next available opportunity. On top of reports coming from the set of Iron Man that he was living up to this reputation, it was also noted that director Jon Favreau wasn't exactly loving his performance. Then by the time Iron Man 2 rolled around, he would soon be replaced by Don Cheadle. The saddest part of this story is looking back at that first Iron Man film where Terrence sees the War Machine suit and says, "Next time." Little did he know, there would never be a next time. In at number 9, Brie Larson. When Brie Larson was confirmed to play Captain Marvel, the comic book trolls bombarded the Rotten Tomatoes page with negative reviews before the film was even released. Part of the reason fans were upset with this new Marvel character was mostly due to how much they pushed the fact that she was a woman, as if there was never any female superheroes before her. Fans correctly noted how Wonder Woman was able to allow the character to just speak for herself when it came to sending a message of female empowerment. Although with Captain Marvel, there was almost too much of a focus on her gender being the reason that she was a hero. Perhaps the main reason she had become difficult to work with was that Larson's own politics began creeping in during press junkets. In what was a PR nightmare, Brie made several comments about how there were too many white men in Hollywood, which even included the critics that review the movies. She's not wrong, but it's also a very hostile way to start your MCU journey, especially considering that most of her castmates are, well, white men. In at number 8, Natalie Portman. In another stunning example of identity politics spoiling casting choices, Natalie Portman originally left the MCU because of a female director being fired. Portman was locked in to do the Thor sequel, but after top executives decided to drop Patty Jenkins as the director, Natalie was furious. She also made a point of letting every news outlet know just how deeply upset she was by the decision. Natalie wanted to quit immediately following Jenkins' departure out of protest, but she was contractually obligated to finish the film. Although one of the most surprising things to happen at the 2019 San Diego Comic-Con was the announcement that Portman would be returning to the MCU for an appearance in Endgame, as well as the next installment of the Thor solo series. So she can't be that hard to work with. In at number 7, Edward Norton. When The Incredible Hulk was released, no one really considered that this would officially be the second entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. At the time, Edward Norton was an excellent choice to take on the Jekyll and Hyde scientist Bruce Banner. Although once the film came out, rumors started circling that Norton was very difficult to work with on set. One insider report claimed that he insisted on rewriting the script himself. These claims were confirmed a decade later by Ed himself during the roast of Bruce Willis, where he utilized his time on stage to take shots at Marvel. Norton would go on to say that he thought they should at least try to make one Marvel movie that was at least as good as the worst Chris Nolan movie. Just major shade. Although this hostility is not out of place, shortly after he was fired, Kevin Feige released a statement saying, "Our decision is definitely not based on monetary factors, but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members." Fair enough. In at number 6, Gwyneth Paltrow. Even though Gwyneth Paltrow has been part of the MCU since its inception, she clearly only is paying attention to the paychecks. During an episode of the Netflix show Chef's Table, she completely forgot that she was in Spider-Man Homecoming. And even worse was that she had no idea Samuel L. Jackson was a member of the MCU, even though she had been in 5 films with him at the time. Although at 46, Paltrow wasn't interested in dressing up in a superhero suit anymore and was very vocal about this upon her departure from the franchise following Endgame. Gwyneth told Variety magazine that she doesn't see herself committing to any more sequels and that she really only got involved because she was friends with director Jon Favreau. In at number 5, Idris Elba. Most actors that are part of the MCU see it as a blessing for their career, which is a lot considering that most of Hollywood shied away from superhero films because they didn't want to be pigeonholed. Even though Idris Elba had a key role in the franchise, he still believed in the latter and actually referred to working in Marvel movies as torture. Specifically, he was referring to his role in Thor 2 and the reshoots required after he had wrapped on the film Mandela: Long Walk to Freedom. Idris elaborated on this scene, specifically when he told media outlets, "I'm actually falling down from a spaceship, so they had to put me in a harness in this green screen studio, and in between takes I was stuck there. Fake hair stuck on my head with glue, this effing helmet while they reset. And I'm thinking 24 hours ago I was Mandela. I was literally walking in this man's boots. Within 6 months we were all so in love with this film that we had made. I was Mandela, practically, then there I was, in this stupid harness with this wig and this sword and these contact lenses. It ripped my heart out." And that statement ripped mine out. We love you, Idris. Why would you be so difficult to work with? In at number 4, Mickey Rourke. Oscar winner Mickey Rourke famously hated starring in Iron Man 2, even saying after his starring villain role that Marvel heads diluted his character Ivan Vanko to a one-dimensional bad guy, adding that creative control rested with some nerd with a pocket full of money calling the shots. Mickey Rourke is the kind of actor that always wants to add more layers to his character, and although they initially agreed to this, he was surprised when the decision makers pulled the rug out from underneath his intended performance. Mickey went on to say, "I'm not a Marvel fan. Once I did a movie for Marvel and they cut the whole goddamn thing out. When you bring it to the table, it's really disappointing when they cut things out." According to reports, Rourke did not take this decision lightly and would continuously be a pain to work with on each day that he was scheduled to film. In at number 3, Vin Diesel. There's almost no end to the stories about Vin Diesel being hard to work with. The star has been accused of hitting on interviewers and stirring feuds with co-stars. Most notably was his recent feud with Dwayne Johnson. When Vin Diesel started to voice the character of Groot, everyone absolutely loved the character. Luckily for Vin Diesel, he never really had to directly interact or work with other actors in the film. While Groot may seem to be one of the most unifying characters characters for the Guardians of the Galaxy crew, the reality is the actor voicing him is the exact opposite. According to reports, while filming Fast and Furious 7, he was an absolute nightmare while on set. This insider told The Hollywood Reporter Vince spent a whole day in his trailer one day. The next day, they waited 4 hours for him. He called a meeting of studio execs to his trailer for 2.5 hours to say, "What the F am I doing here?" And then the next day, work was done with doubles, and another source confirms that progress had been frustrating with the whole crew suffering from low morale. All thanks to Vin Diesel. In at number 2, Guy Pearce. Before starring as the slimeball villain Aldrich Killian in Iron Man 3, Pearce had a list of demands before he agreed to even take on the role. While his agency was excited at the opportunity to have their client involved with this project, Guy was a little more hesitant. He was very open about how he preferred to work with interesting directors and weighty material, but took the meeting because he enjoyed the first Iron Man film. Shane Black, who directed the film, was a big fan of Guy Pearce and was basically bending over backwards just to get him in the room for a meeting with Marvel Studios. Shane ran him through the general idea of how he would be involved in the film, but Pearce did end up telling his agent that he was not going to do the movie until they showed him the script. As we're sure you know by now, Marvel is very secretive about handing out material for projects because, well, they don't want any details leaked. Although when Pearce refused to take the role without a script, they emailed him a link that would expire after 2 hours. Last but certainly not least, on our number 1 spot, Anthony Hopkins. After Thor: The Dark World, Anthony Hopkins admitted that he had no interest in coming back as Odin for the following film, Thor: Ragnarok. Apparently, he had been so disinterested in the entire Thor franchise that he felt doing 2 movies was more than enough for him. It wasn't until Taika Waititi was announced to be directing the next movie that he agreed to stay on board. I guess when you've been acting as long as Anthony Hopkins has, you can kind of start throwing your weight around with demands. He was a big factor in the decision to make this film more comedic than its predecessor. He insisted again and again that he would not be part of the MCU if they decided to take the film in the same dark and gritty route that the previous one did. Sure enough, the film turned out to be a standalone classic of the franchise, but his posh attitude was duly noted by executives at the time. In at number 10, Robert Downey Jr. This point may be a bit different than the rest of these Marvel actors. Although Robert had a long history of being wild and difficult to work with, his Marvel days were rather tame. In fact, he has been praised for just how easy he is to work with. Although if you're an executive at Disney, you may not view him in the same light as his fellow actors. Robert is a stark defender of equal pay in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When he saw his paycheck, he advocated that the other actors get paid more, because he really didn't like the vast disparity between what they were getting paid. He even made a very public stink about just how underpaid his co-workers were, and said that most were only making a fraction of his salary. While the bad publicity may have helped them even out the pay, it certainly put him on the Disney exec's bad side. In at number 9, Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones has been around Hollywood for a very long time, and his acting chops and charismatic on-screen performances have made him a staple in the industry. Although he has been known to be a bit of an on-set bully as well. According to Jim Carrey, Tommy was verbally threatening people left, right, and center while filming Batman Forever. In terms of the Marvel Universe, Tommy Lee Jones played the role of Colonel Phillips in Captain America: The First Avenger. In his defense though, Jones managed to keep his anger under wraps while filming and overall didn't cause too much of a stir while on set. However, if you listen to anyone that's worked with him prior to the MCU, they really found him to be difficult to work with. In at number 8, Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving played a pivotal role in the MCU when he joined as the evil character called Red Skull. Although when it came time to reprise his role in Avengers Endgame, he noted that negotiations with Marvel proved to be impossible. Most actors that first negotiate contracts with Marvel executives were told that they were obligated to do at least 3 films, but that the pay would slowly raise with each one. However, Hugo noted that when it came to starring in the Avengers, his pay grade was far less than what he had received for the first one, and that he wasn't even offered any more films following that. He continued by saying, "They said it's just a voice job, it's not a big deal. I actually found negotiating with them through my agent impossible, and I didn't really want to do it that much, but I would have done it." The problem with that statement is that Hugo has been very open about just how much he hates doing voiceover roles. Especially when he voiced Megatron in the Transformers movie. He said it felt empty and meaningless. In at number 7, Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan is perhaps one of the most famous Norwegian actors in the world today and is very well trained thespian in the Dogma 95 style. According to his co-workers though, he is notorious for pranking people, and apparently he has leveraged his intimidating accent and dramatic flair to outright scare his co-stars beyond belief. He actually managed to coerce actor Paul Bettany to work with him in the film Dogville, a film for which Bettany refers to as a disgusting experience and compared Stellan's acting process to torture. When it came time to film the Avengers, Stellan was very outspoken about how he felt lost amongst the superheroes. He told interviewers that he didn't know how they were going to cram all of them into one movie and still have a story that actually moves forward. Whoa, I bet the executives didn't like that press. In at number 6, Finn Jones. Finn Jones was the star of Marvel's Iron Fist, and while he was fairly easy to work with in regards to the day-to-day acting, it became more of a scripting issue than anything else. According to his co-workers on the show though, he just didn't have any real chemistry with any of them, which included his real-life friend Jessica Henwick, who played the show's love interest Colleen Wing. This lack of chemistry most definitely shows up on screen, and this actually is the reason the show received so much backlash from fans. They were certainly upset with the casting decision for Finn as the title character Danny Rand. This lack of simple human on-screen connection with his fellow actors made it very difficult to produce new stories surrounding him. In at number 5, Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis is without a doubt the king of motion capture performances, beginning with his roles as Gollum, King Kong, and Caesar in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This style of acting can be extremely difficult because, well, behind the scenes it feels incredibly silly, but because he has learned to trust his acting skills, he has leveraged himself into some very big movies. More recently, his villainous role in the Avengers Age of Ultron and Black Panther, although this has always been a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and as such he has carried this with him to each project every time. Most notably was the squabbles that he had with Marvel's graphic and CGI designers. Apparently he had been very rude and dismissive to them, even though he was simply the actor that was cast in the role based on his stellar previous performances. Since being labeled a king of that genre, his ego has just gotten far too out of hand, and therefore Andy believes that he always knows best. In at number 4, Corey Stoll. While some of these Marvel actors have been hard to work with because of executives getting in the way and others with their diva-like behavior, Corey Stoll falls into the pretentious category. Corey Stoll plays the villain Darren Cross in Ant-Man, and while promoting the film, he had been known to hijack the interviews to spout the limitations of his art form and the emptiness of politics. Most of the films that he's done in the past never really had a chance to hit the public first without Corey adding in some liberal bias and defaming reflections to the characters that he's played. Apparently, he has a very bad habit of expressing just how disappointed he was with production, and as I said, most of the time this took place before the film ever was even released, which for sure puts executives on edge when thinking about casting him in their films. In at number 3, Stan Lee. Now, don't get your panties in a bunch. I love Stan Lee as much as the next person, and without him we wouldn't even be talking about Marvel. That being said, Stan had a long history of being extremely difficult to work with and for. He has a very checkered past when it comes to his history as a writer and comic book publisher. Most notably was his very public feuds with Jack Kirby, which put the legacies and rights of the characters into a tailspin. Thankfully, all of his cameos in each of the Marvel films were so minuscule that he never really had an opportunity to stir up any controversy while on set. However, if he had been on longer than just a few days, there's no telling what kind of drama Mr. Lee could have started. That being said, rest in peace, we love you forever, Stan Lee. In at number 2, Tom Holland. Also known as the king of spoilers, we have the young addition to the Marvel Universe, aka the new Spider-Man, who should most definitely be renamed to Spoiler-Man. Perhaps the funniest and most upsetting moment for Tom's co-stars was when he did a live stream of him opening a package from Mark Ruffalo. As he pulled out the poster for the unannounced Avengers Endgame, it clearly said on the pack, "Confidential, do not share." Yet it wasn't until Tom flipped the page around that he realized the amount of trouble that he had just caused for everyone at Marvel Studios. Following this, almost all of his interviews were paired up with an adult just in case he began to spill the beans. Last but certainly not least, in our number 1 spot, James Spader. Another man that went under some motion capture drama was actor James Spader, who delivered an exceptional performance as Ultron. During an interview with Rolling Stone, James admitted that he has a very strong obsessive compulsive issue, and because of this is very particular with filming. Multiple actors who have worked with him in the past, such as William Shatner, recall that James doesn't even like watching people eat. Maggie Gyllenhaal also admitted that because he always remains in character, he can be extremely difficult to be around. Even the showrunner for the show The Blacklist alleged that he had to speak with Spader on the phone daily because he was always having an issue with scripts. On one occasion he said, "On Thanksgiving when I was in Colorado, I was out pacing on the phone for 2 hours. This stuff keeps him up at night. He can dig his heels in, the conversations can be frustrating." Can't even imagine.